All right, let's jump right into this explainer and unpack some seriously explosive claims surrounding what is arguably the world's most powerful consulting firm. Now, if you pay any attention at all to global business, politics, or the economy, you have definitely heard the name McKinsey & Company. They are the ultimate insiders. We're talking about the folks advising CEOs, presidents, and massive institutions all over the globe. But what actually goes down when they show up at the door? Today we are unpacking a highly talked about investigative book called When McKinsey Comes to Town by Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times journalists Walt Bogdanich and Michael Forsythe. And to keep things completely fair, we'll be balancing their hard-hitting findings with the nuanced perspective of a former McKinsey insider. It's a fascinating deep dive into power, prestige, and practice.
And that brings us to the really provocative question at the very heart of this devastating investigative book. Is the world's top consulting firm actually a force for good or a source of evil? The authors literally spent years pulling back the veil of secrecy on an organization that, let's be honest, typically operates entirely behind closed doors. I mean, they interviewed almost 100 current and former employees to piece together this picture of a firm that publicly claims to be values-driven, but according to the book, often leaves a trail of corporate and social wreckage right in its wake. But, as you'll see as we go through this, the reality of consulting at this ultra-elite level might be just a bit more complicated than a simple good versus evil binary.
Section 1. The Aura of McKinsey. Okay, before we get into the heavy controversies, we really have to grasp the sheer scale and unmatched elite status of this place. This firm commands a massive global footprint with 30,000 employees. And listen, these aren't just any employees. They are meticulously handpicked from the absolute top universities in the world. We're talking Harvard, Oxford, and other elite Ivy League institutions. McKinsey consistently attracts the absolute brightest young minds, promising them an unparalleled education in high-level business and the chance to solve the world's toughest problems. And they operate out of more than 130 offices globally, directly shaping the strategies for the biggest corporations and governments on the planet. Their alumni network is equally staggering. They place former consultants in incredibly high-ranking positions literally everywhere. Just as one example, take the current U.S. Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg. The influence here is vast, and it's deeply, deeply embedded in both the public and private sectors.
And if you want to understand their day-to-day reality, think about this. Conducting massive, sometimes mundane, but absolutely crucial global research reports. They pull incredibly complex data from across 16 different nations simultaneously, from the US and the UK all the way over to Saudi Arabia and Japan. They are constantly gathering data, analyzing geopolitical shifts in real time, and turning all of that into very high-priced advice for their clients. It really makes you wonder just how much insight they truly have into where the entire world is heading next.
Which perfectly sets up this insider quote that perfectly captures the firm's almost mythical influence over global business and human history. The quote goes, "To those convinced that a secretive cabal controls the world, they are wrong. There is, however, McKinsey & Company." It's an inside joke among consultants, sure, but it speaks to a very real public perception. People are always looking for the Illuminati or secret societies pulling the strings of the global economy, but the reality is much more corporate, heavily credentialed, and armed with PowerPoint presentations.
Section 2. The book's explosive thesis.
So let's talk about the dramatic shift from public relations to the investigative journalism presented in the book. The authors argue that the firm justifies working with some pretty shady clients by using a very specific internal defense. They claim they merely execute strategies without questioning the underlying moral values of the client. It's a philosophy of execution, not policy. Basically, the firm allegedly tells its young, incredibly idealistic recruits that their job isn't to judge the morality of a client's business model, but simply to help that client run their operations more efficiently. This exact compartmentalization is how the book claims McKinsey can justify working for some of the most controversial entities on the planet.
Section 3. The Consulting Hall of Shame.
So the crucial point here is what happens when that execution philosophy goes terribly wrong. The authors meticulously researched McKinsey's involvement in 5 highly controversial sectors, explicitly accusing them of playing both sides of the fence. First, they consulted for opioid manufacturers while simultaneously advising the FDA. Second, they helped Big Tobacco sell cigarettes long after the health risks were known and later researched youth vaping flavors for Juul. Third, they advised insurance companies like Allstate. Fourth, they worked with authoritarian regimes as well as U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. And fifth, despite publicly claiming to fight climate change, they continue to serve massive greenhouse gas polluters.
Let's dive into some specifics. For instance, the firm actually reached a nearly $600 million settlement regarding their advice to, quote, turbocharge opioid sales. The book goes into intense detail about how McKinsey advised Purdue Pharma on selling more OxyContin, which is a highly addictive drug at the very center of an epidemic that has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. Now, while McKinsey has apologized for not adequately acknowledging the epidemic, the sheer financial and human scale of this one specific consulting project is a central pillar of the book's entire critique.
And then there's the Allstate situation. The book exposes a genuinely shocking internal slide advising the insurance giant. The authors describe a strategy featuring an actual picture of an alligator, which was used to insinuate that the insurer should systematically delay payouts. The advised strategy was literally to sit and wait for vulnerable, sometimes poorly educated victims to simply give up on their exhausting, time-consuming lawsuits and just accept a much lower payout.
Furthermore, the authors call out a massive double standard regarding the environment. They point out the hypocrisy of the firm claiming to fight climate change while simultaneously collecting massive fees from top carbon polluters. The book notes that since 2010, McKinsey has worked for at least 43 of the 100 companies that have emitted the most CO2 since 1965. Number 3 on that specific list, Chevron, paid McKinsey $50 million in 2019 alone.
Section 4. The Insider's Nuanced Defense.
Now, as I mentioned, to remain perfectly impartial here, we absolutely need to look at the gray area and hear the perspective of a former McKinsey consultant. This insider argues that the book heavily skews its focus towards the absolute worst 2 to 5% of projects, completely ignoring the vast majority of standard, everyday business work. Yes, the scandals highlighted in the book are very real and they are devastating, but McKinsey does hundreds, if not thousands, of projects every single year. The overwhelming majority of these are not sinister plots. They are just average, sometimes incredibly boring, efficiency improvements for standard companies.
In fact, most consultants spend their days on very ordinary revenue growth and efficiency tasks across dozens of normal industries. We're talking a vast array of 17 different sectors: technology, consumer retail, banking, healthcare, you name it. The book frames McKinsey primarily as these ruthless corporate cost-cutters, but the reality is that their unique approach just reconciles rigorous analytics with creativity to help regular, everyday companies survive crises and grow. It's actually a highly diverse portfolio of relatively mundane corporate problem-solving.
And we really can't ignore the bright side here. A ton of these young talents actually join the firm specifically to be a force for good. They want to actively work on undeniable positive impacts. For example, reducing ocean plastic waste. The ex-consultant we've been referencing specifically worked on a project investigating real-world options to stop plastic waste from entering our oceans. There is a deep, genuine self-understanding among the firm's young recruits that they want to improve the world, which actually sparks some pretty fierce intergenerational debates with the older senior partners about exactly what kind of clients the firm should be taking on.
Section 5. Just serving the market.
All of this brings us to the ultimate systemic dilemma regarding corporate power and global economics. Are firms like McKinsey the root cause of these problems, or simply a reflection of a market economy that prioritizes profit above absolutely everything else? As the former consultant notes, McKinsey is a mercenary, the highest servant of capitalism, but not the creator of it. At their best and their worst, they merely reflect where our current market economies stand. Our global economy is literally designed to incentivize actors to maximize profits. It's not designed to necessarily save the environment or prioritize public health. If McKinsey suddenly took a highly moralistic stance and rejected all controversial business, well, they'd probably just lose those massive contracts to a less scrupulous competitor. They are a catalyst for capitalism, for sure, but they definitely didn't invent the rules of the game.
And this leaves us with a pretty profound final thought. Most consultants eventually leave the firm, but the elite training they get there stays with them for life, leaving us all to wonder, how will the next generation choose to wield that immense power? The analytical rigor, the problem-solving frameworks, the ability to synthesize massive amounts of data into actionable strategy, these are unmatched skills. So whether you view McKinsey as a source of corporate evil or a brilliant engine of market efficiency, the real question is what the brilliant minds trained inside those walls will do next. Will they use those tools to extract maximum profit at any cost? Or will they use them to actually fix the systemic issues our world faces? That is the real takeaway you should leave with today. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the structures around you.